The evening light settled softly over Springfield, turning the worn brick houses a shade of gold. Inside one of them, Linda Collins wiped the last counter at the Magnolia table, the little family restaurant where she had worked for nearly a decade. Her movements were quiet, practiced, the kind that came from years of doing what needed to be done without complaint. To most people in town, Linda was the woman who never said a harsh word. They knew her smile, the neat bun of brown hair she pinned every morning, and the steady calm that followed her like the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen. Few knew what she had survived. Years ago, when she was still Linda Collins Whitman, she had a husband and a younger sister she adored. The betrayal had come slowly, first a distance in her husband's eyes, then whispered phone calls, and finally the truth that shattered everything. Her sister Stacy had fallen in love with him, or thought she had, and when the affair came to light, both of them disappeared, leaving behind a newborn girl and a house full of silence. Linda could have turned her back, could have let the state place the baby in foster care, but when she held that tiny bundle in her arms, something in her steadied. She named the child Rachel Collins, after her late grandmother, and raised her as her own. The paperwork wasn't perfect. Back then, it hadn't been simple to become a guardian, but Linda made sure Rachel had everything she needed. School lunches paid on time, doctor visits covered, a warm home, and love that never wavered. Now Rachel was 11, a bright-eyed girl who always smelled faintly of soap and cinnamon. She helped her aunt pack napkins and polish silverware, humming to herself as if the world had never hurt anyone. On weekends, they walked to the farmer's market or fed ducks at the park pond. Their apartment was small, 2 rooms above a bakery, but it was filled with sunlight, secondhand books, and the laughter of 2 people who had learned to build happiness from very little. At the Magnolia table, Linda's boss, Andrew Miller, often watched her work with quiet respect. He was a widower himself, a man who believed more in decency than words. Linda never noticed the way his gaze softened when she spoke to a customer or tied her apron strings. She simply worked, grateful for a job that kept the lights on and Rachel safe. That night, as she locked the restaurant door and the warm scent of biscuits drifted into the street, Rachel slipped her hand into hers. "Do you think life ever stops being busy?" the girl asked. Linda smiled. "Maybe not," she said. "But if we're lucky, it keeps being kind." They walked home under the fading streetlights, 2 silhouettes against the quiet Missouri dusk, carrying with them the simple peace of a life rebuilt from ruins. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked quietly as the night settled around their little apartment. Springfield slept, but Linda couldn't. She sat at the table, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. In front of her, a cup of chamomile tea had long gone cold. Every so often, her mind pulled her back to the night her marriage ended, the night her world changed without warning. Mark had come home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, his shirt half untucked. The look in his eyes said everything before he spoke. And when the truth finally spilled out that it was Stacy, her own baby sister, it didn't come with anger anymore, just exhaustion. Linda had packed his things without a word. She didn't scream, didn't cry. The next morning, he was gone. A week later, Stacy showed up at her doorstep, trembling and hollow-eyed, clutching a blanket with a newborn inside. "I can't do this," she had whispered, setting the baby down on the couch like something fragile she couldn't bear to hold. "I ruined everything. I thought I loved him. I didn't. Please take her, just until I get my life together." Linda had looked at the child, so small, so unaware of the wreckage around her, and felt a weight press deep into her chest. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. Stacy left that night. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and when a year passed with no word, Linda realized the baby wasn't a guest in her home. She was home. That baby was Rachel. As the years passed, Stacy's occasional postcards came from different states, each one shorter than the last, until they stopped altogether. Linda told Rachel that her mother was traveling for work, and the little girl accepted it, too young to see the ache behind her aunt's smile. In their neighborhood, no one questioned anything. To the world, they were mother and daughter, inseparable, ordinary, content. And Linda wanted it to stay that way. Every time the mailman delivered an envelope from social services or the school board, her stomach tightened. She feared that someone, someday, would notice a missing paper, a misplaced signature, a truth that could unravel everything she had built. Linda reached across the table and touched the edge of Rachel's school, drawing pinned to the wall. A sketch of the two of them standing under a bright sun, holding hands. Above their heads, the little girl had written in crooked letters, "Me and Mom." Linda smiled softly, a tear catching in the corner of her eye. "That's all that matters," she whispered to herself. "No one needs to know anything else." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, the shadows of the past grew quiet again. The morning sun spilled through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the kitchen floor. Linda stood by the stove, tying her apron while Rachel sat at the table, swinging her legs and nibbling toast. The girl's eyes shone with excitement as she watched her aunt check the clock for the third time. "Is it true, Aunt Linda?" Rachel asked between bites. "There's going to be a real wedding today, with a white dress and everything." Linda smiled faintly. "That's what happens at a wedding, sweetheart. The bride wears white. The groom wears nerves." She adjusted her collar, grabbed her worn leather purse, and sighed. "It's going to be a long day." Rachel leaned forward eagerly. "Can I come? I'll just help in the kitchen. I promise. I need to earn for my new school shoes." Linda hesitated. The request was innocent, but weddings were chaos, especially this one. It wasn't just any celebration. The bride was Anna Brooks, daughter of Robert Brooks, one of Springfield's wealthiest businessmen. The event had been booked at the Magnolia Table months in advance, with Andrew Miller personally overseeing every detail. Every staff member was expected to be flawless. "You're too young, honey," Linda said softly. "There will be hundreds of guests. Important people. Reporters, maybe." "But I'll stay out of sight," Rachel pleaded. Her small hands clasped dramatically. "Please, Aunt Linda. I'll only wash dishes. I can do that. You said hard work builds character." Linda sighed, caught between practicality and that bright, hopeful face. "Fine," she relented, pointing a finger in mock warning. "But you stay behind the counter, no wandering off. And absolutely no talking to guests. Understood?" Rachel grinned, so wide it nearly split her face. "Understood." By late morning, they arrived at the restaurant. Now unrecognizable. Chandeliers glimmered from rented frames. Roses filled the air with perfume, and the polished floors reflected sunlight like glass. Outside, luxury cars lined the street, each one gleaming like a mirror of another world. Linda changed into her crisp black uniform and joined the other servers. She moved with quiet efficiency, folding napkins, checking table settings, keeping her focus sharp. Rachel, in a borrowed apron far too big for her, peeked around the kitchen door, wide-eyed at the glittering crowd beyond. Through the window, she caught her first glimpse of the bride, a graceful young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. "She looks like a fairy," Rachel whispered to herself. Andrew passed by, nodding at Linda. "Big day, huh? Everything's got to be perfect." Linda smiled politely. "It will be." She didn't notice Rachel sneaking another look toward the ballroom, captivated by the colors, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses. For Rachel, it was a glimpse into another life, a dazzling, unreachable world where people seemed to have everything. For Linda, it was just another day of work, another reminder of the quiet line that separated people like her from those who never had to worry about rent or the price of shoes. But that day, The line between their worlds would blur, more than either of them could ever imagine. By mid-afternoon, the wedding was in full swing. The air inside the magnolia table shimmered with laughter and the soft murmur of conversation. Guests toasted, cameras flashed, and the string quartet played a slow, elegant melody that drifted through the room like warm honey. In the kitchen, Rachel wiped sweat from her forehead and beamed when Linda handed her a folded stack of napkins. "You've been a big help today," Linda said. "Think you can replace the used napkins on the main tables? Just take your time, stay quiet, and remember, no talking." Rachel nodded dutifully, clutching the bundle of fresh white cloths to her chest. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped into the main hall, eyes wide. The chandeliers sparkled like stars above her, and the laughter of people in silk and suits felt like something from a dream. She moved carefully between the tables, replacing the napkins one by one, unnoticed amid the bustle. When she reached the far end of the hall, she realized she'd forgotten an entire stack near the back corridor. She turned, slipping into the narrow hallway that led toward the restrooms, dimly lit and quiet compared to the noise outside. That was when she saw him. The groom stood in the shadows, his tuxedo jacket undone, his hands around the waist of another woman, one Rachel recognized as the pretty bridesmaid who had been laughing beside the bride earlier. The woman giggled softly, whispering something Rachel couldn't hear. The groom bent his head, kissed her, and smiled with a look that made the little girl freeze. Her heart pounded, so hard she thought someone might hear it. She backed away, holding her breath. She wasn't supposed to see that, trying to act normal. Rachel hurried back into the hall, but just as she passed the couple's table, something strange caught her eye. The groom had returned, now standing beside his new bride. His smile was bright, charming, but his hand moved under the tablecloth in a hurried, secret motion. Rachel slowed, curiosity overpowering fear. He pulled a small glass vial from his pocket, glanced around, and quickly shook a fine white powder into the bride's champagne flute. The entire act took seconds. Then, with perfect composure, he raised his glass, kissed the bride's cheek, and walked away. Rachel's hands trembled. She knew she should stay quiet. Aunt Linda had told her not to interfere, but her chest felt tight, her stomach twisting. The bride, Anna, sat there, radiant and unsuspecting, reaching for her glass. Rachel swallowed hard and took a step forward. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice quivering. "Are you sick, ma'am?" Anna looked up, startled. "Sick? No, why?" "Because," Rachel hesitated, glancing toward the hallway, "your husband just gave you some medicine. He poured it in your drink." The words fell like stones in the sudden silence. Anna blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "What did you say?" Rachel pointed to the champagne flute. "I saw him. He had a little bottle. He poured something white inside." The people around the table went still. Anna's fingers hovered over her glass, her smile fading. Her eyes darted toward the groom's retreating back, and in that instant, understanding hit her like ice. She lowered the glass slowly onto the tablecloth. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, voice trembling but steady. Then she turned to watch her groom, every trace of love draining from her face, replaced by something cold and sharp. The music kept playing, but for Anna Brooks, the celebration had just ended. The orchestra struck up a cheerful tune as waiters refilled glasses and guests clinked them together, their laughter echoing under the crystal chandeliers. At the center of it all sat Anna Brooks, her hand resting lightly on the stem of the champagne flute that now felt like a loaded gun. She smiled, calm and radiant, though her pulse hammered in her throat. When the groom, Ethan Reeves, returned to his seat, she tilted her head sweetly. "Ethan," she said, voice carrying just enough to draw a few nearby glances. "There's an old family tradition my grandmother loved. Newlyweds switch glasses before the toast. It's supposed to bring good luck. The groom froze, the smile on his face stiffening like plaster. That's silly, Anna, he said lightly. Let's just toast. Anna lifted her flute halfway. Oh, come on. Don't you want us both to be lucky? He reached out, his hand trembling slightly. I'd rather keep mine. You know I don't like jokes like that. Around them, a few guests paused mid-conversation, sensing the tension. Anna's lips curved into a colder smile. Really? You seem to enjoy your last joke just fine, she said quietly enough for only him to hear, but her eyes, hard and unflinching, stayed fixed on his. The silence thickened. Then Anna's voice rose, clear and sharp. If you won't switch, perhaps someone should tell me why. Murmurs rippled through the tables. Ethan stammered something, reaching for the glass, but Anna stood first, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. Would someone please call the police? She said evenly. My groom tried to poison me. The room exploded. Guests gasped. A few laughed nervously, thinking it must be a prank. But Anna's father, Robert Brooks, had already risen from his seat, his expression thunderous. He grabbed the glass from his daughter's hand, sniffed it, then glared at Ethan. What did you put in there? Son. Ethan's face went pale. Nothing. She's crazy. Ask Lily. He pointed toward the bridesmaid, the same woman Rachel had seen in the hallway. Lily tried to slip away, but two ushers moved to block her path. Andrew Miller, seeing chaos erupt in his restaurant, rushed forward, motioning for calm. Please, everyone, stay seated. Let's not make assumptions, but it was too late. Someone had already dialed 911. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside. The police arrived, taking statements as the party dissolved into whispers and panic. Cameras flashed, guests huddled, rumors flew. From the kitchen doorway, Rachel stood frozen, her hands clutching her apron, eyes wide with shock. Linda found her there, pale and trembling. Honey, what happened? Rachel couldn't speak. She only shook her head and buried her face against Linda's side. Hours later, when the last patrol car pulled away and the laughter had long since died, Linda and Rachel walked home through the quiet Springfield streets. Neither spoke. The night air was cool, heavy with the scent of roses trampled underfoot. And somewhere in the distance, a siren faded into silence. Sunlight crept through the thin curtains, spilling soft gold across the room. For a moment, Rachel thought it was an ordinary morning, the kind where Aunt Linda would hum while brewing coffee, and the smell of toast would fill the air. But then she heard voices, deep, unfamiliar voices. Her heart lurched. They were in the living room, 3, maybe 4 people. A man's tone, calm and firm. Another voice she didn't recognize. Then Linda's, quieter than usual. Rachel froze beneath her blanket, pulse racing. What if it was the groom? What if he'd escaped and come to find her? She curled into a ball, clutching the blanket to her chin. He's not coming here, she whispered to herself. He can't. But the fear clung to her like a second skin. The voices grew clearer as someone moved closer to the hallway. Rachel could make out bits and pieces. She's just a child. We're not here to frighten anyone. Please, have a seat. Unable to bear it any longer, she peeked out from under the blanket. The apartment door stood open, sunlight streaming through. On the worn couch sat Andrew Miller, still in his pressed work shirt. Beside him, a man in a tailored gray suit, Robert Brooks, and standing near the window, holding a bouquet of white lilies, was a woman Rachel recognized instantly. The bride, Anna Brooks. Rachel's breath caught. The woman looked different without her wedding gown, smaller somehow, but her eyes were steady and kind. She smiled faintly when she noticed Linda pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. Rachel's stomach twisted. They had found her. They knew what she'd said. What if they were angry? What if she'd ruined everything? She slid quietly out of bed, trying to listen better, but her elbow brushed against a stack of books. They tumbled to the floor with a sharp thud. The room fell silent. "Rachel." Linda's voice called softly. "Honey, you can come out." Rachel froze mid-step, her face burning. Then, slowly, she pushed open the bedroom door. For pairs of eyes turned toward her. Andrew gave a reassuring nod. Robert Brooks set his coffee down, studying her with a kind of fatherly curiosity. And Anna, still holding the lilies, took a step forward. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently. "It's all right. We just came to talk." Rachel blinked, too stunned to reply. She hadn't imagined this moment. The bride she'd saved was standing in her living room, smiling like someone who owed her everything. Outside, the morning traffic began to hum again, but inside that little apartment, time seemed to hold its breath. Rachel stood by the door, clutching the hem of her sweater, as Anna set the bouquet of lilies down on the table. The scent filled the room, light and calm, a strange contrast to the fear twisting in the girl's stomach. Anna smiled gently. "You probably don't realize what you did yesterday," she said softly. "You saved my life." Rachel blinked. I did." Robert Brooks nodded, his voice deep and steady. "The doctors ran tests last night. The powder in that glass wasn't sugar or vitamins. It was a sedative, a strong one. In your system, Anna. It could have stopped your heart in a few hours." Linda gasped quietly. "Oh my God." Anna nodded. "If I'd drunk that champagne, I might not be standing here today." She looked at Rachel again, eyes warm but serious. "You were very brave." Rachel's throat tightened. No one had ever called her brave before. She shuffled her feet, glancing down. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she murmured. "I just didn't want anyone to get hurt." Robert's expression softened. "You did the right thing, young lady. Never apologize for that." There was a silence then, gentle but heavy, like the air before a summer storm. Rachel looked from face to face, Anna, Robert, Andrew, and Linda, and suddenly felt a wave of guilt she couldn't explain. Her lips trembled. "There's something I need to tell you." Linda turned sharply. "Rachel," but it was too late. "She's not my mom," the girl blurted out. The words came all at once, fragile and frightened. "She's my aunt. My real mom left me here when I was a baby. I don't want to be taken away. Please, don't let them send me to one of those places." Her voice broke, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't want to lose her." The room fell silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. Linda pressed a hand over her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told the truth long ago, but I couldn't risk losing her. She's my family, the only one I have." Robert Brooks exchanged a look with Andrew, one of understanding rather than judgment. The businessman leaned forward, his tone firm but kind. "No one is taking her anywhere," he said. "Not on my watch." Anna smiled through tears. "You both deserve peace. After everything you've done, you deserve that much." Linda finally broke down, shoulders shaking as she covered her face. Andrew reached out quietly, resting a hand on her arm. "It's all right," he murmured. "You did what any good mother would do." And for the first time in years, Linda let herself believe it might actually be true. The afternoon sunlight slanted across the table, catching the steam rising from the coffee mugs. The tension that had filled the little apartment began to ease, replaced by a quiet determination. Robert Brooks set his phone on the table, his calm authority filling the room. "I've spoken to an old friend at the Department of Social Services," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We'll make sure everything is done properly this time. Linda, by tomorrow morning, you'll be Rachel's legal guardian." Linda stared at him, hardly breathing. "You can do that, just like that?" Robert smiled faintly. Not just like that. But I can open a few doors. He looked at Anna. After what this woman has done for years, without help, without recognition, she deserves peace, not punishment. Anna nodded. Completely agreed. Linda's eyes welled again. Mr. Brooks, I don't know how to thank you. I wasn't trying to break the law. I couldn't let her go. Robert raised a hand. You don't need to explain. A piece of paper doesn't make a parent. What you've done does. From her chair, Rachel watched in silence, her hands gripping the edge of the table. So I won't have to leave, she asked in a small voice. Linda turned to her, voice trembling. No, sweetheart. You're staying right here. This is your home. For a second, Rachel didn't move. Then she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and rushed into Linda's arms. The woman held her tightly, resting her chin on the girl's hair. Eyes closed as relief washed through her like sunlight after a storm. Andrew stood near the counter, quiet but deeply moved. He'd watched Linda work for years, humble, kind, steady, but seeing her now, he realized just how strong she truly was. Few people would carry that kind of burden so selflessly. Few would love so purely. All right, Robert said, glancing around. Now that we've settled the serious part, how about something to eat? I'm starving. Linda laughed through her tears. I can manage that. I've got leftovers, homemade stew and cornbread. Minutes later, the 5 of them crowded around the small kitchen table. The food was simple but warm, filling the room with the scent of comfort. Conversation turned lighter. Anna teasing her father, Andrew complimenting Linda's cooking, Rachel giggling between spoonfuls. For the first time in a long time, Linda didn't feel like a woman surviving. She felt like a woman living. Rachel leaned against her shoulder, whispering, I'm not a temporary kid anymore, am I? Linda smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. No, sweetheart, she said softly. You never were. 3 months later, the magnolia table looked nothing like it had the night of the Brooks wedding. The chandeliers still shimmered above the dining hall. But this time their light fell over a smaller crowd, family, friends, and a few loyal customers who had become part of Linda Collins's quiet circle. The air smelled of lilacs and fresh pastries, and laughter floated between the tables like music. At the front of the room stood Linda, dressed in a simple ivory gown that caught the afternoon light. Andrew Miller waited beside her, wearing a dark suit and the kind of smile that came only from peace long overdue. Robert and Anna Brooks sat near the front, beaming as if the day belonged to them too. Anna reached for her father's hand, whispering, It feels right, doesn't it? Robert nodded. It does. Some weddings start with chaos. The good ones start with grace. Behind them, Rachel adjusted the hem of her pale blue dress, her cheeks glowing with excitement. She wasn't just a guest today. She was the bridesmaid, the little girl who had changed everything. On her feet were the shoes she had once dreamed about, white leather flats tied with satin bows. Anna had surprised her with them that morning, tucked neatly in a box that read for the girl who believes in miracles. When the music began, Rachel led the way down the short aisle lined with wildflowers. Her heart raced as she turned back to see Linda walking arm in arm with Andrew, the 2 of them sharing a look that spoke more than vows ever could. The ceremony was short and tender. No grand speeches, no lavish decorations. Just a promise sealed in the warmth of those who truly cared. When Andrew slipped the ring onto Linda's finger, Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. She'd never seen her aunt look so happy, so completely at peace. Afterward, everyone gathered around the small dance floor. Anna coaxed Rachel into a spin, and Robert laughed so hard he nearly spilled his champagne. The music swelled, and Linda and Andrew shared their first dance as husband and wife, their hands intertwined like they had been waiting a lifetime for that moment. For Linda, the night wasn't about a new beginning. It was about finally arriving where she was meant to be. Rachel leaned her chin on the table later that evening, watching them sway beneath the soft lights. "She finally got her happy ending," she whispered. Anna smiled beside her. "No," she said gently. "She built it." And as laughter filled the restaurant once more, the little girl in the white shoes knew she wasn't just part of someone's story. She was home. A year had passed since the wedding at the Magnolia table. The restaurant had grown even more beloved, not because of the menu or the decor, but because of the people who ran it. Linda and Andrew worked side by side. She managed the front. He oversaw the kitchen, and together they turned the place into the heart of Springfield. Locals came not only for food, but for the quiet warmth that seemed to live in every corner. Most evenings ended the same way, Linda wiping the counter while Andrew locked up, and Rachel sitting at the corner booth doing her homework, humming softly. The girl had blossomed over the past year. Her teachers called her bright and determined. She'd even joined the school's writing club. Every week, she came home waving a new story or poem, proud and shy all at once. Linda often paused to watch her, heart swelling with a quiet kind of gratitude. There had been a time when fear ruled every decision. Fear of losing her, fear of being found out. But now the papers were official, the home secure, the love undeniable. Rachel wasn't the secret burden of a broken past anymore. She was the heartbeat of a new beginning. On Thursday nights, the Brooks family always came by. Robert brought flowers for Linda and a bottle of wine for Andrew, while Anna helped Rachel with her writing assignments. Their laughter filled the restaurant long after closing, as if joy had decided to move in permanently. One evening, after the guests had left and the last dish was stacked away, Linda stepped outside onto the back porch. The Missouri air was cool, thick with the scent of rain. She could hear Rachel inside, talking to Andrew about a school essay, her voice full of energy and light. Linda smiled to herself. Life had come full circle, not perfect, not easy, but finally right. Later that night, Rachel sat by the window of her small bedroom, notebook open, pencil moving across the page. The moonlight pooled over her desk as she wrote, her letters neat and deliberate. Sometimes she wrote, "Miracles don't make noise. They happen quietly in small kitchens and kind hearts, in the hands of people who simply refuse to stop being kind." She looked out at the lights of Springfield, the faint hum of the city wrapping around her like a lullaby. Then she smiled, closed her notebook, and whispered, "Good night, Mom."